What if the foundation of China's incredible economic rise wasn't as solid as it seemed? For decades, the world has watched in awe as skyscrapers pierced the skies and cities expanded at breakneck speed. But behind this glittering facade lies a shocking truth. China's real estate empire may be nothing more than a fragile house of cards. How did a nation so focused on growth end up with ghost towns, unsustainable debt, and a housing crisis that could shake the global economy? This is the story of ambition running headfirst into reality, where promises of prosperity collide with speculation and mismanagement. The consequences? They're not just economic. They cut deep into culture, stability, and trust. Stick around, because the answers will challenge everything you thought you knew about the world's second-largest economy. In 1988, Deng Xiaoping flipped the script on China's economy by allowing land use rights to be bought and sold. This bold move unleashed a tidal wave of real estate development, transforming sleepy cities into bustling urban hubs. Skyscrapers sprouted like bamboo, and homeownership became the dream of millions. For a moment, it felt like China had found the magic formula for growth, an economic boom fueled by bricks and mortar. But here's where things get intriguing. Real estate wasn't just about living space anymore. It became a playground for investors. Developers borrowed heavily, riding the wave of skyrocketing demand. Urbanization moved at lightning speed, with city skylines expanding in every direction. Housing prices climbed higher and higher, pulling the economy along for the ride. It was prosperity on overdrive, or was it? The cracks, however, were hard to ignore. For many, homeownership stayed out of reach as prices soared beyond affordability. At the same time, luxury apartments stood eerily empty, a sign that vacancy rates were creeping up. Housing had become less about shelter and more about a financial chess game. And yet, the momentum of growth made it hard to hit pause. As cities filled with unlit towers and over-leveraged projects, a question began to loom. Could this growth continue without consequences? What seemed like endless expansion was starting to reveal its fragility and set the stage for a dramatic shift no one saw coming. China's real estate market didn't just grow, it exploded. Developers like Evergrande seized the moment, borrowing heavily to meet the insatiable demand for housing. Towers shot up at dizzying speeds, symbolizing the nation's ambition and economic muscle. But this rapid growth came at a price. Debt leverage became the fuel that powered the industry, while housing prices soared, making property ownership a symbol of status and a gamble for many. With the boom came speculation. Apartments were snatched up not to live in, but to invest in, turning homes into commodities. Vacancy rates started to creep higher, with entire complexes standing as ghost towns. Real estate became the backbone of China's economy, but the cracks were forming. The balance between growth and sustainability? Let's just say it wasn't a priority. Still, the allure of quick profits kept the cycle spinning. Urbanization was speeding ahead, and cities grew faster than planners could keep up. It seemed unstoppable until whispers of trouble began to surface. Could developers keep the promises their debt relied on? Or was the system on the brink of something no one dared to predict? The answers were growing harder to ignore. Fascinated by the hidden stories shaping the world's economies and cultures? Subscribe now and turn on notifications to explore mysteries, shocking truths, and untold histories you won't find anywhere else. The journey to uncovering the extraordinary has just begun. Join us and never miss a revelation. By 2018, the cracks in China's housing market had become impossible to ignore. Despite the nation's rapid urbanization, a staggering number of housing units remained unoccupied. Entire developments stood like ghost towns, silent reminders of speculative buying gone awry. What was meant to be a solution for growing urban populations had turned into a peculiar financial asset, untethered from its original purpose as a home. This transformation was fueled by a cultural shift where owning property symbolized wealth and security. Families stretched their finances, sometimes leveraging multiple generations, to invest in real estate. Developers, sensing the frenzy, built faster than demand required, hoping to cash in on the booming market. Yet, the glut of vacant properties hinted at an imbalance that could no longer be swept under the rug. The speculative bubble began distorting the market further. Housing prices rose beyond the reach of most, creating a paradox. More homes than people to fill them, yet ownership felt increasingly out of reach. For many, real estate was no longer about living comfortably. It was a high-stakes investment that only added to the economic tension brewing across the country. This growing disconnect between housing availability and affordability set the stage for deeper problems. The question loomed: how long could a market built on speculation sustain itself before the weight of empty apartments and soaring prices tipped the balance? The answer was closer than anyone anticipated, as the market's unsustainable nature edged toward an inevitable reckoning. By 2020, the Chinese government had had enough of unchecked real estate expansion. To rein in reckless borrowing, they introduced the 3 red lines, a strict policy designed to limit developer debt. Suddenly, giants like Evergrande found themselves in uncharted waters, unable to continue their debt-fueled growth. The property sector, once a shining symbol of China's economic might, began to unravel, exposing just how fragile its foundation truly was. The 3 red lines didn't just slow developers, they slammed the brakes. Companies reliant on aggressive borrowing were forced to rethink their strategies. Debt leverage, once their greatest weapon, had become a liability. This regulatory shift sent shockwaves through the real estate market, freezing projects mid-construction and leaving buyers in limbo. It wasn't just buildings that were left incomplete. Confidence in the system began to crumble. But the impact didn't stop with the developers. The ripple effects spread to construction workers, suppliers, and even everyday investors who had poured their savings into unfinished homes. Vacancy rates climbed, and urbanization efforts stalled as the once booming property sector became a cautionary tale. The economic slowdown fueled by these policies touched every corner of the market, making one thing clear: the fallout wasn't over yet. Now, the question lingers: could this regulatory move stabilize the market or send it spiraling further into crisis? The consequences of these policies stretched far beyond real estate, putting immense pressure on the government's promise of prosperity. Ready to dive deeper into this unfolding drama? Hit that subscribe button and join the conversation. We're just getting started. The collapse of China's property sector didn't just stay in the realm of real estate. It rippled across the entire economy. Once a pillar of growth, the industry's struggles began to weigh heavily on the nation's middle class. Homeownership, a cornerstone of financial stability for many, suddenly felt more like a liability than a secure investment. As confidence waned, consumer spending and overall economic momentum began to falter. The labor market was among the hardest hit. Construction workers, architects, and suppliers faced widespread layoffs as projects ground to a halt. The ripple effects even extended to unrelated industries, from steel manufacturers to small businesses relying on the spending power of a robust middle class. What had once been a booming engine of economic activity now seemed to be pulling the country into an economic slowdown. Even more telling was the emotional toll on the population. Families who had poured their savings into properties that remained unfinished or devalued began questioning their financial futures. The trust in the once unshakable real estate market began to erode, leaving many unsure about their role in a slowing economy. The dream of urban prosperity was dimming, and the cracks were starting to show everywhere. As China grappled with these challenges, a larger issue loomed on the horizon. How would the government restore faith in a system that so many had relied upon for economic security? The answers weren't simple, and the story was far from over, hinting at even deeper challenges ahead. China's meteoric rise relied on an unspoken agreement. Citizens would work tirelessly and endure sacrifices in exchange for economic prosperity. But as the real estate crisis deepened, this social contract began to fray. Homeownership, once seen as a reward for hard work, now carried the weight of unfinished projects and dwindling property values. For many, the promise of stability was starting to feel like a mirage. The middle class, long considered the backbone of China's growth, found itself under immense pressure. Families who had invested in real estate to secure their futures now faced mounting uncertainties. With debt leverage spiraling out of control and vacancy rates climbing, trust in the system eroded. The housing crisis was no longer just an economic issue. It was a deeply personal one, shaking the very foundation of people's lives. Urbanization had always been at the heart of China's development strategy, but the slowdown raised questions about its sustainability. Cities, once bustling symbols of progress, now bore the marks of economic slowdown, with ghost towns and empty buildings dotting the landscape. The fallout extended far beyond housing. It touched jobs, savings, and the very dreams of a prosperous future that had driven generations. As tensions grew, so did the stakes for the government. Could they rebuild trust and stabilize the market? Or would this crisis push the nation into uncharted territory? The unraveling of the social contract hinted at a larger challenge, preserving stability in the face of growing disillusionment. The real estate crisis wasn't just about buildings or economics. It struck at the heart of China's identity. For decades, homeownership symbolized success, stability, and upward mobility. But as the housing market crumbled, so did this deeply ingrained cultural belief. Families who once saw property as a cornerstone of their future began to question their trust in the system and even the broader vision of national progress. Politically, the stakes couldn't be higher. The Chinese government, long praised for its ability to deliver economic growth, faced mounting pressure to address the crisis. Economic reforms that had once fueled prosperity were now being scrutinized for their role in creating this fragile house of cards. Restoring confidence wasn't just an economic necessity. It was critical to maintaining political stability in a nation built on the promise of shared success. Meanwhile, the cracks in the property sector revealed a growing disparity between the nation's ambitions and its reality. Urbanization, once hailed as a triumph, began to feel like an unfinished symphony. Vacancy rates in cities became a stark reminder of mismanaged growth, while economic slowdown left millions questioning their place in the larger narrative of progress. The tension between aspiration and outcome had never been so visible. As the crisis deepened, so did the conversation about China's future. Could the government rebuild the trust it had lost? Or was this the beginning of a larger reckoning? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was certain. This story was far from over, and the next chapter would be even more revealing. You've just uncovered one of the most complex and intriguing stories of our time. A tale of ambition, risk, and consequence that shaped a nation. But this isn't just about China's real estate crisis. It's a reflection of how economic booms can disguise deeper cracks. Doesn't it make you wonder what other hidden forces are quietly shaping our world, right beneath the surface? Think about it. How many other stories are out there, waiting to be discovered? Stories that could completely change the way you see global power, culture, or even history itself. What you've learned today is only the beginning, the tip of an iceberg filled with secrets. The question is, will you stop here, or will you dig deeper? Knowledge like this isn't for everyone. It's for those who crave insight, who strive to see beyond the headlines. If you're one of those rare minds, don't stop now. Subscribe to our channel and activate notifications to stay ahead of the curve. Together, let's uncover the truths that make us smarter, bolder, and closer to understanding the world's most fascinating mysteries.